Hi, and welcome to the Central Concepts and Theories of Child Development Content Talk. This content talk will review some of the core issues in child development and present a few of the most relevant theoretical models that continue to influence teaching, and especially our current understandings of child development and learning, and how we can really think about what does development look like, how do we conceptualize development within our society and within the classroom, and then what theories are most relevant to our work. The quotation, "Heredity deals you the cards and environment plays them," is a metaphorical description of how nature and nurture interact. It is attributed to the emeritus professor of psychology, Charles Brewer of the Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. And that citation you can see at the bottom of the slide. It's something that we definitely see as a concept in learning development, and that is the nature and nurture. Nature is those inherent traits that come to us via our genetic characteristics and tendencies. And the nurture refers to the environment, those environmental conditions from which the child is a part of because of their environment. So their immediate home and, of course, our children in our school. So, for example, nature is people's height, their weight, their hair color, their eye color. And then nurture are the actions or the interactions, the political views, the distinctions of socioeconomics, or perhaps the clothing design for children, or maybe even we can think about nurture as the discipline methods or the teaching styles that different people ascribe to. So when we think about development, we also need to think about the difference between universality and diversity. Universality describes developmental changes and sequences that occur in all humans. So no matter what environment you're in, these are developmental changes that we can anticipate. And then diversity refers to the developmental changes that are inherent within individuals. For example, what is universal is that most children learn to sit, walk, and run in that order. Examples of diversity in development are that parents in hunter-gatherer families such as Papua New Guinea carry infants until they can walk, while parents in other cultures may put infants down, encourage tummy time, help them crawl. In Papua New Guinea, carrying infants can protect them from predators in the wild. And so this is a individualistic need that is due to the environment. Children in Papua New Guinea develop walking skills at the same rate as infants who crawled in other cultures. These individual differences are important for us to consider as we think about child development. Research on child development tends to look at group averages for skills, such as the age when children usually speak their first words. Yet children can develop this skill and other skills very differently from one another. For example, this graph shows the number of words in children's productive vocabularies. We can see that at the lower axis, you can see the age in months, and then that productive vocabulary goes up the left-hand side. So the red line shows the average child says about 300 words by age 24 months. We can see that right here. Let's see if I can pick up my marker. So we're looking right at this time point. And then we can look at how by nearly 600 words are happening at age 36 months of this time point. In contrast, the green line shows that children in the 90th percentile have nearly 700 words in their productive vocabularies at 30 months old. So 700. The blue line shows that children in the 10th percentile only have about 300 words. which is quite a remarkable difference between these ages of toddlers. This means children in the 90th percentile have more than double the amount of words of children in the 10th. Both nature and nurture can contribute to individual differences in development, and particularly language development. The development of a child who is born blind, that's genetics impacting that development, can vary depending on the way the family adapts and how the home environment is set up. Developmental milestones are also factors that we really analyze in the classroom when you take your child to the pediatrician's office. These are the projected milestones that we anticipate children will reach. It's important to understand that when children are not reaching developmental milestones, and they could benefit from additional resources and services, knowledge of child development is essential to identifying atypical patterns. Resources such as the Head Start Early Learning Outcomes Framework and other resources are useful to determining typical development at various ages. That's what's great about the DRDP, the Desired Results Developmental Profile. It has already taken account for the theories that we're going to discuss and helped us think incrementally across stages of development. In general, if you notice something atypical about a child's development, you should pay attention to patterns and take careful notes rather than jumping to conclusions right away. You can communicate with parents and other staff members to verify the observations that you're making, or you can make sure you're looking at different observations at different time points and the child is in different settings. This is important. It is not the teacher's job to diagnose specific developmental issues, but rather to identify developmental patterns. Inviting parents and connecting with other professionals can really allow us to have more detailed understanding, and that way we can have more detailed assessment based about our concerns. The earlier the identification of developmental delays, the greater the potential of services for the child and family. So it is a careful balance that we hold the child sacred as we look and investigate. Children are active learners, and it's really important to keep in our minds that not only are we thinking of learning domains, but that we have to think of the domain about approaches to learning, where children really are those active agents in their environment. Several of the theories that are highlighted will discuss that child does propel themselves within the environment. They're not passive, waiting to be taught, waiting to have us pour that knowledge in. They are explorers and scientists who act on the world around them in order to learn. In other words, children's environments do affect them, but the opposite is also true. Children affect the environment. For example, when young children are babbling, they're practicing making noises, but they're also figuring out within that practice that their noises mean something, and their noises are communicating, and their babbling is getting reactions from the adults around them. Similarly, when children, then a little older, start to drop objects from their high chair, they're exploring their world as well. Does this object make noise? Can I see it when it falls? Where did it go? Will someone pick it up? So as we think about the environment as something that influences the child, just like you may be testing out with some activities you're creating, whether it's a brain building activity or whether it's a provocation, to see how your children will explore materials, we also know that children are acting on their environment. There will be a video link if I can't get it to work within this presentation. And this video shows some different examples. Child development is a complex process that's influenced by experience, culture, and individual differences. So when you watch the video, think about some common concepts such as nature and nurture, universality versus diversity, individual differences, and active learning. Let's see if I can get it to pull. Oops. So what I'd like for you to do is just pause for a second so that you can think about those concepts within that baby's video, and then come back and we'll talk about 3 of our theorists here. So along with several other important influencers, and I will definitely want to share those within our certificate course cohort, and I know Dr. Williams will be sharing some other individual theorists and important influencers in education as well. But for this talk, we're going to focus in on Jean Piaget, Vygotsky, and Yuri Bronfenbrenner. Many scientists and philosophers, have developed theories of child development. In fact, we owe a lot to Piaget because he really led the way with a lot of ideas about child development. He was not always popular at his time because, you see, his sample size was relatively small when he was investigating child development. But these theories, they'll gain and lose popularity, and there's so many other theories. But these 3 theorists continue. They have made a big impact on education and the world of child development, but they continue to have a direct impact on social constructivism. And so these 3 are very important for us to consider. So, with Piaget believed that children construct knowledge about the world by forming ideas and testing them out and refining their ideas. And, he had several principles within those concepts like assimilation and accommodation. His principles of understanding this construction of knowledge is really what's happening in the brain, guys. The brain is being physically constructed by the interactions that children have in their environment. When I was early in my learning about constructivism, I used to think about, constructing knowledge, building knowledge. Yeah, I get that. But it was really when we knew so much more about the brain that it was like, all of the scholars were saying, aha, look, you are constructing knowledge about the world. As you test them out, these pathways in your brain get so much stronger. Or if you're not testing them out, that pruning process happens. But Piaget's views of cognitive development in early childhood education can be broadly characterized into 4 stages. So sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational stages. So sensory motor, according to Piaget, children are in the sensory motor stage from birth to 2 years. In this stage, children are learning to coordinate their own actions with objects in the physical world. So artifacts and object play and being able to interact with real things is super important. A lot of times we see children are understanding the world by using their senses because they're engaging with their mouths and their bodies. The biggest accomplishment in this stage is understanding object permanence, which is one of the key contributions that Piaget has given us to understanding. This is the moment where we can see mental images are forming. And what that means is, through sensory motor actions, through this investigation of the physical world, the child is beginning to have the mental tools to hold these images in their mind. So object permanence, which is when the child understands if an object is moved away from their purview, their immediate vision, they still know that it exists. And so this is a fundamental element within sensory motor. Pre-operational is the next stage, and those of you working in preschool classrooms and kindergartens and first grade classrooms, most often of the children are functioning in this pre-operational stage. In this stage, children engage in symbolic play. So we see them transition. Objects are still important. They're gaining vocabulary knowledge from objects. There's still a lot of sensory motor involvement because they need to manipulate. When in education we say hands-on learning, well, this is why. We need to gain understanding, and we move that into symbolic play by using language and mental images. And so this is really important as we manipulate objects to help us symbolically. Children at this stage do not necessarily, are not considered to have concrete logic, although we can see some pretty good evidence to argue that a little bit. But in most cases, we think about pre-operational stages as a lot of pretend play, taking on roles, still not necessarily understanding the difference between reality, what's real and what's fantasy, which is a good way to think about this stage and how it's different from concrete operational. Piaget noted that children in this stage of cognitive development are egocentric and have difficult time understanding other people's point of views and perspectives and beliefs. You know, we also have evidence that while that may be true, children can be empathetic at a very early age. Even 1 to 2 year olds can show this empathy and can develop that self-regulation. Concrete operational stage involves children around 7 to 11 years old. This stage is characterized by children's increasingly ability to think logically. You know, they're able to hypothesize and have more correct hypotheses because obviously they have more experience in the world, so that's important. And they're able to just kind of have more of an abstract approach to thinking. The formal operational stage is when children are above the age of 12. You know, pubescence has happened. It's early adulthood up to about age 20. Depending on brain theorists now, you know, brain theorists will help us understand that the adult brain, especially in the male brain, sorry to all the men out there, but you know, female brains usually mature around age 22 to 26, but on the upper end for the males. So children become more sophisticated in their ability to have logical conclusions and deductive reasoning, and they're much more hypothetical without having to have the real objects or experience. So love Vygotsky. Those of you who have interacted with me know that Vygotsky is one of my favorite theorists, so I'll try to be unbiased as I talk about him. And even in this slide depicts one of his most remembered contributions, even though it was really one of the smallest things that he wrote about. Zone of proximal development. Students are always talking about the zone of proximal development, and teachers as well. And that is essentially, you know, what the child can do with help and what the child can do alone. And then we understand, you know, what are the skills to be gained. But ultimately, his greatest contribution, please do not let the zone of proximal development underscore what his most important contribution is. And that's really the understanding that social cultural relationships help to mentor and scaffold and guide and develop children's learning and development. He did, unlike Piaget, who believed that these developmental patterns were there and, you know, that development-led learning, that, you know, only children could learn when they'd had this stage of development. Vygotsky saw learning and development in a different way, where there was this reciprocity amongst the two types of functions. And this is very important. When we think about the impact and interactions of the social environment and the adult's interactions. He also, really, his other biggest contribution is for us to understand that language and tools. He talked about language and the world of object play, how objects, and this is very similar to Piaget, but Vygotsky understood that at each age there was a leading activity there. There was something that was really guiding the development and having this back and forth exchange. And so, for example, with our pre-K world and our kindergarten world, play is the leading activity of development. But beyond that, Vygotsky really was influential to helping us understand that mental tools are really what helps children think, and that language and thought are intertwined. And this is an important thing as we think about helping children develop their language skills, because we want them to be thinking as well. So Yuri Bronfenbrenner, he's another favorite of mine, and Bronfenbrenner takes a really bird's eye perspective. I want you to think about being on an airplane and being able to look down out of the window, or if you haven't been on an airplane before, but maybe you've been in a high balcony, and you can look out from that balcony and you can see, all of the systems that are at work. Everybody's just so small and there's all these different environments. Well, that's what Bronfenbrenner helped us understand. Children develop within the context of their environments, and the interactions between children and their environments are bidirectional, which means they're reciprocal. Children act on their environments, and the environments shape children. His theory, like others, proposed that individuals are not living in an isolated world, meaning that, here's the home and here's the school, and both are developing simultaneously but without one another. More that these are overlapping circles where the child is the center of gravity. These are Bronfenbrenner's words, actually, that the child is center of gravity within these units, and so that it's the home and school and community and society. He even talks further about that time and change are on the very perimeter of these different, if you imagine concentric circles. And so we think throughout time how periods of history have influenced the development of children. So this is important to remember, that children develop within environments and their specific context is so important, but then the greater world. And this is why you hear lots of discussion about bias and societal stereotypes, because those greater, larger societal influences can filter down into the home and into the school. Bronfenbrenner indicates the most influential context is the microsystem. So the microsystem is going to be that immediate environment, which includes the child's family and usually caregivers, if they're in school. And then the mesosystem, we go out from there, which is usually the community that the home and school is within. And then the macro system is the largest component, which would be the greater society influence. Now that this content talk is over, there's a couple of YouTube links to check out. You'll hear a little bit more about Vygotsky and a little bit more about Piaget, I believe, and a couple of others maybe there as well.